as far as the bubble setup goes for the overlay, it's important that this first gather that we take out of the furnace, when we come back, we block that glass. It's kind of counterintuitive. We want to block the glass back towards the head of the pipe, because what's most important for stability and getting the overlay over is that we have a progression of thickness from the neck going down to the bottom. So by setting up where the clear glass is and then a quick little blow, we'll be able to get a nice progression of thickness, and we'll take a gather and show you that in a second. So you want to push that clear all the way back to the edge of the pipe. And I just let it hang a little bit and push that clear back again. We're trying to set up this thickness right up here. This is what's most important for this overlay. And then what we'll do is we'll just take a gentle little heat here. We'll come back, just give it a skin with the block, and I'll put some air into it. And then I'll go pretty quick on the neck into some fresh glass, and we'll arrest it with the air. It's really important that that neck doesn't move once we start putting the neckline in. So one more just quick little skin. Pushing back just a little bit. Take it. I usually do just a little bit of a sag back at this point. And a little bit of air. And a quick little heat, and we go right to the neckline. We cut it in pretty good before we get any air going. I start to get it going like this, cut it in, and then generally what I'll do, hang it, air that neck. We don't want that blowing out at all. I'll come back down, hop on this, and have Megan blow just a little bit. Off. I'll restrict that neck a little bit more. Sometimes I might even put just a little bit more air here. We really don't want that blowing out. And then one more blow, Megan. Off. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it can happen on any side, but the most important thing, I mean, you can look right here, I don't know if it translates on the video, but you can see a layer of clear right there, really thick, and that's what's going to give us stability later in the process. And also, as far as shape, it's pretty much round, maybe just a little bit on the squat side. I think that this should be maybe just a little bit more blown up, so I might just take a heat and just give it a little puff, because it's a little bit too squat for my liking. So. Just a little puff, Megan. Off? Yeah, that's looking pretty good for me. And then when I do it with a two-man team. I don't know if you guys have a 3 or 2-man team, but a 2-man team, what it does is it allows this to go in the garage and really set up so that when we heat it later, we can be more specific with our heat, because the heating on the overlay is pretty important too. If you have a 3-man team, sometimes this doesn't cool down enough before you're ready to get the overlay going. So we can talk about that later. Shine heat here, but the most important thing for the bubble that's getting the overlay is that you have like a nice gentle taper on the sidewall and kind of a rounded bullet shaped face. So you want to be just a little bit tapered from perfectly flat, and then a nice round face on it. Something close to that. This is a little white here. You want the whitest point to be back on the edge of the pipe as well. So I'll maybe just take just a little bit of air from Megan here. Blow for just a sec. Off. It's pretty close. This right here is just a little bit more tapered than I'd like it to be, and it's a little wide right there. The shoulder needs to be a little bit further back. And I was just a little shy on heat when I went for it, so I'll take another heat and just give one more final shape. All right, that shape's a little bit better. That's kind of what we're looking for. Overall, it's maybe a little bit skinny for the overlay that we're gonna send over. And now the next step, this is really, really important, is that you give this adequate time to cool down. If this doesn't cool down enough and you have heat in it, it's gonna be moving all over and you're not gonna have the stability that you need in order to get the overlay on. So just giving it time, letting it cool down, letting it be set up, taking a couple little flashes to make sure the skin's hot and ready to receive the overlay. When I take the overlay, I used to have people sag and then flip and then stick it, but I found that it really threw the overlay bubble off when I did that. So now I prefer to have my assistant stand in place, turning, and I like to just gently grab it, and I'll put just a small little bit on, turn a little bit, put a little bit more on, turn a little bit, put a little bit more on, turn a little bit, so that it's a progressive application of the bit instead of just pushing it right on there. You want to be nice and controlled, and just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and then crack it off. So as far as Megan goes, she's going to be heating this. It's important when she goes into heat that she'll get a little bit of a progressive heat on the bottom. You pretty much want the top half of the bubble to be more or less cold and the bottom half to have a progression of heat towards the tip. And it doesn't need to be ripping hot, but it needs to have a nice bit of life in it so that it's fluid. You don't want it to be really soppy hot. You just want it to be pliable so that when I push it, it can just accept the bubble nice and easy. It's a little on the warm side. So what you can do is you can have your assistant can do a little bit of hang or a little bit back and forth and gauge the life in it. And I just use my jacks to chill it. And I normally tip it down like that to make sure no chips are off. Now this is really important. This is where a lot of people mess up. This first heat you can't ever get back. The lip is cold at this point. We're trying to drive heat into the back where we're trying to fold it over. So it's important that we take a good heat that's also deep. I generally like to make sure that the burner is close to the back side of that fold where we're going to be trying to affect change on it. And I take a reasonably long heat here because once that lip starts to open up, we can't ever get those heats back. Like it's just too thin to get a big heat on it. What's really important here is as I'm pushing with my tool, that I'm making sure I'm doing slow, even pressure with downward force. If I push too much towards the pipe without proper adequate pressure down towards the floor, that's where you're gonna run into bubble issues. So I was just a little bit cold on my heat here, so I'll go back in, making sure that I'm heating deep and that the burner's like hitting right there. Just open it up just enough to get the tool in there. And then nice and slow here. This is where I think you were worried about bubbles. You just want to make sure that you're nice, slow, steady, downward pressure, that you're maintaining pressure against the bubble, pushing down as you're pushing back. It's just a little bit cold there, but I got it seated. What was most important is that I was nice and controlled and seating it right there. So again, a nice deep heat. Downward pressure the whole time. Nice even turning. Sometimes, if I'm worried about it going too far here, and I want to get one more press, I'll curl this back in a little bit, because as long as this stays in, you can still get a heat. My lip's a little bit on the thin side here. If I had been a little bit more concerned with the thickness there, I would have had more stability. But definitely on the thin side. What you missed off camera is that when we put our bubble in the garage, it fell off center when we weren't paying attention, so I had to do a couple of adjustments, and that blew the neck out just a little bit. So I kind of, on that last heat while I was talking and not paying attention, I let the lip get out just a little bit. So before I take this next heat, I was just gonna curl it back in a little bit so I can get a big heat. Push right here, make sure that I have nice, good connection at the union. And on this next heat, I'm gonna spin it out kind of like a platter. I'm gonna take a long, slow heat, turning slow, and then I'm gonna come in with my middle finger and my thumb and press right against the bubble, right against the union, and push it back, all the way back. What's important here is that you spin nice and slow at the beginning so that you can get the heat that you need on the back side of the rim. Thumb and forefinger right on that connection, sliding all the way down, turning strong, making sure that your thumb and finger are strong all the way down. Just slowly riding it out to the very, very end, and then just a nice gentle paper overall. Obviously my paper was a little bit dry and we got shit on it, but whatever, wet your paper beforehand.